Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by NSTA, the National Science Teaching Association. Find out more about what NSTA has to offer at nsta.org. You're listening to Lab Out Loud, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. And today our Beyond is in a tree farm learning about trees.
The trees that we purchase to plant in our fields are usually 3 years old. From that time, it takes 8 to 10 years to become an 8-foot Christmas tree. So we're always looking out, 8 to 10 years, trying to plant the right quantity, the right species, and then Mother Nature comes in and she gives us rain or drought or whatever. So it's a long-term investment and a long-term care to make sure that tree matures into a saleable, beautiful Christmas tree.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first I'm your co-host Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
And we are talking about Christmas trees today. So I know not everybody might have a Christmas tree in their house for the holidays, but maybe your neighbors do, people down the street, your students do, things like that. And we thought, let's get some info about this crop that is essentially harvested every year for the holidays.
Yeah, so do you do a real Christmas tree, Dale?
We don't. So
that sounded like a little shame there.
Well, because we're talking to two tree farmers shortly, but we don't. We have two artificial trees, mainly because my wife is allergic. So when she was little, they got a new tree, and that's how they found out that she had asthma, because she started wheezing and things like that. And so that doesn't work so well in our house. When I was a kid, we always had a fresh new Christmas tree.
And then in my family, my brother-in-law did some tree farming, or Christmas tree farming, in fact, and so that was never a choice. So we never, but we do a live tree every year, and fortunately we have French doors for our front door. So getting the tree in the house has been a lot easier, and has been just the sheer fact of having that front door the way it is has saved my marriage multiple times every year.
Well, that's probably another reason why some people choose an artificial tree. If you live in a really urban area, and you gotta stuff it in an elevator or stuff like that. I'm sure they make accommodations to pull it off, but there's probably a factor there where you just can't get your tree into your space. So,
well, in any case, we found a tree farmer that was willing to talk to us, and actually, they connected us with another tree farmer who's also a research scientist. So we got a really good.
So basically, one of our contacts branched off into another one.
Yeah, and they kind of said
branched off into.
Oh, I see what you did there. There's actually another tree pun at the end of the episode if you listen. And I was amazing. We avoided some until now, but Dale broke the mold there. In any case, yes, we have two tree farmers. One's a research scientist. They are great. They have a lot of great information to share with us about Christmas trees, how they're grown, how they're sustained, some of the science behind that. You even learned a little bit about Christmas tree reproduction.
I did. I was really surprised. Well, not surprised. I just surprised I didn't realize it until now. So here with us to chat with us about Christmas trees first is Neil Krueger.
My name is Neil Krueger. My family and I raise Christmas trees in Minnesota. We have a tree farm that supplies trees locally to our customers. And in the past, I've worked for Mead Paper, and I've also worked for Anderson Windows.
And also joining us is Dr. Shawn Schottler.
My name is Shawn Schottler. I grow Christmas trees in western Wisconsin, both on my farm and on my parents' farm. We have been growing Christmas trees now for almost 40 years as a choose and cut tree farm. And I have a day job as a research scientist for the Science Museum of Minnesota, where I've been doing that for 22 years.
So the first thing we needed to know was what actually makes a Christmas tree a Christmas tree?
Well, I'll jump in and say the thing that makes a Christmas tree are the people who own it and appreciate it. It's a family thing. And a Christmas tree could be a twig, a branch, a beautiful tree. It's all about the family that's around it and how they appreciate it.
So there's no specific within the species range. This is the Christmas tree, family.
Well, in the Midwest, we tend to use spruce, fir, and pine, and those are traditional. But even when I was in college and I couldn't have something in my room, I went out and cut some dogwood trees and put them in a vase and called that my Christmas tree for the year. So
we can have that expansion a little bit. Yeah, if we're down south, we definitely see palm trees with lights on it, and
sure,
that might not sit well with the Midwest, but at the same time, whatever works, right?
Right.
One of the things that I think makes a Christmas tree is the smell. Our customers almost always say which ones smell the best, and to them, that's a Christmas tree. And of course, the color green simulates or evokes a Christmas tree memory somewhere because of the color and because of the smell.
So, what about the smell? Is there a preference? So what do most people like?
Well, on the smell scale, the balsam fir smell the best. And of course, they're the firs that don't hold their needles quite as good as some of the other varieties that, like Fraser, tend to hold their needles better. But for sure, the balsam smell the best.
Neil is absolutely correct. That is a very important thing to our customers. And I will say that the world of fragrance and scents in Christmas trees is evolving right now because we are growing a lot of new varieties of trees, and some of them have fragrances that are new and wonderful. We're growing a species now called a Siberian fir that it smells so good that when I'm out working, I cut the branches and lay them on the defrost above my truck so that the fragrance will fill the inside of my vehicle. And we grow Coriander fir, which have this citrusy smell. And we try to grow concolor fir because they smell like tangerines. And we show people that when they come out, we snip a few needles and let them smell them. And so the fragrance is moving well beyond balsam fir, and we have some fantastic ones coming. And they're here.
Mm-hmm. Is that like the Honeycrisp of apple trees, where we've done some selective breeding and gotten these qualities coming out?
There's some of that, and there's also we're gathering and growing trees from other parts of the world now, because there are fir trees stretch all around the northern hemisphere, and so they're bringing in seed sources from other places, and then we bring them here and select various traits from them or cross them. Both Neil and I are growing a tree called a Coriander cross balsam, so we're trying to get some of the best traits from both of those. I would encourage people who are interested in trees to be open to things beyond balsam and Fraser that we've seen for the last 50 years.
Okay, so many students that might be listening might be comfortable with the understanding of how do we get selective breeding in animals for traits that we want to see. Dogs, the domestic dog might be a perfect example there, but how does that work in trees?
In trees, we try to select the trees that have the qualities that we're looking for, and then gather the seeds or the cones from those trees, and then propagate them. So that's one way to do it with seed trees. And so we're looking for a certain smell or a certain shape that's very desirable. There's also grafting, and that's done to take a rootstock from one tree and then add another tree to it, and then grow it into a mature trees. Shawn, maybe you have a little more detail on that.
Yeah, so hybridizing, crossing different tree species, can be a little tricky. It's trickier certainly than with animals, where you can put two that you want to be together and get offspring. In trees, and in particular fir trees, there's a female part of the tree that will ultimately be the cone, and there's the male part of the tree, it's the pollen. And on trees mature at different times, those parts of the trees mature at different times, which we try to take advantage of because pollen from all kinds of trees can be floating around, pollinating the cones, and then you would not know what the cross of the tree is. And so there are a few growers, very few, who actually put little bags over the female parts of the tree and then introduce pollen the way they want it, so they know for sure exactly what that cross is and they get the traits that they want. And others of us rely on the fact that trees tend to produce the female parts earlier in their life and not the pollen parts. And so if we isolate a tree and it's only 10 years old, but we know all the other trees around it are of a certain kind, then we know which ones they'll be pollinated with. But it's more haphazard because you don't know exactly which pollen and which traits you're going to get.
Okay. I might be a little confused here. Because you have to realize I'm the physics and earth science teacher. So I understand pollen on a flower, pollen on the flowers of deciduous trees, but I've just dawned on me, the conifer trees, where is the pollen on there? I don't, where are the flowers? I mean...
Have you ever parked under a pine tree, Dale?
Yeah. No, not really. Wait, yeah. Where is the pollen?
That's the right answer. Very good.
Okay.
All that yellow stuff that's covering your car is the pollen. They hang down in these little things. They look like, if you know what the catkins look like on a birch tree or an alder, because you sometimes see them as decorations, they're, smaller than a pencil in diameter and maybe a half-inch long, and they hang down on the undersides of the trees. They're fairly nondescript. And
so they've been there and I just haven't noticed.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And
what you end up noticing is the cones. And on any one tree, by the time a tree is 20 years old, both the female and male parts will be on the tree.
Okay. Well, what about genetic engineering? Do we see any coming advances in genetic engineering at all? We see that in other kind of plants there. Does that play a role at all in Christmas tree farming?
As far as I know, I don't think we've got to that point yet. In fact, there's one variety of firs that is just a natural cross. It's a new variety called the Canaan or Canaan fir, and it was in an area where there were balsam firs and Fraser firs growing, and they cross-pollinated to form a unique tree. And so, that's the other side. That's the natural side. I don't know of any genetic engineering going on.
Okay.
There may be genetic engineering going on within the forestry world, and then that may trickle into the Christmas tree world.
Okay. Let's walk our listeners through I guess I would say the two types of traditional Christmas trees. You have your longer needle ones and the shorter needle ones. What types of trees, if you don't know the names, what match up to those two types?
In the long needle, of course, Scotch pine was very popular in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a medium-length needle. There's a Norway pine or red pine. Mm-hmm. And then there's the white pine that's some people call it the furry one. It looks real soft. It is very soft and flexible. Those are the longer needle variety trees.
So then when people select these, they look for smell, they might look for needles. Do some just say that the most expensive one is the best one, so I'm going to go with that?
We like those customers.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah, we sure do.
Definitely this is going to make your Christmas the best.
The short-needled trees would be all of the fir trees and the spruce. And I know a lot of customers put all of those together and they just call them pine trees. But, they are very distinct in that you have pines, spruce, and fir. And within the fir trees, which are probably the most popular things we sell, people are very familiar with balsam fir and becoming familiar with Fraser and Canaan fir. But like I say, within those, what I try to tell customers sometimes is that fir trees are like wine. You don't just go to the grocery store, the liquor store, and say, I want a bottle of red wine or a bottle of white wine and think they're all the same. Mm-hmm. The same is true in fir trees. We grow balsam fir that are selected from lots of different sources: Roan Mountain Fraser fir, Sheets Harbor balsam, Rangeley balsam, Cook balsam, New Hampshire blue balsam, and then our own selections. And those are all like different varieties of wine. We don't often tell the customer about that, but each of those fir trees has different traits. Some of them are important to us as growers, like the time of the year that they bud out and are or are not susceptible to getting frost. And others are traits like color. Some are particularly blue. Some smell different. Some are deeper colors of green. And so there's lots of variety within what we would just call balsam fir.
So which one was the most popular, you said?
It's probably a split between Fraser balsam, almost 50-50 or so.
Okay. And for how long, when you go and get your tree, how long has that, what's the age of that tree when you get it? Like, how long does it take from start to finish? Can you walk us through that cycle?
Sure.
So a seed is planted. Oh, sorry, Neil. Go ahead, Neil.
Okay. So, yeah, like Shawn was saying, a seed is grown first in a nursery, and then usually it's transplanted once or twice into a transplant. And so the trees that we purchase to plant in our fields are usually 3 years old. From that time, it takes 8 to 10 years to become an 8-foot Christmas tree.
Oh, wow.
So we're always looking out, 8 to 10 years, trying to plant the right quantity, the right species, and then Mother Nature comes in and she gives us rain or drought or whatever. So it's a long-term investment and a long-term care to make sure that tree matures into a saleable, beautiful Christmas tree.
So that's 11 years. The seeds are 3 years old. Wow, I did not realize that.
So are there other things that the average customer or the consumer might not know about Christmas trees, how they're made, how they're maintained through the year? I mean, I know there are. What are some of those things?
Yeah.
Well,
we like a couple of things. Go ahead, Neil.
Go ahead. Okay. So we like to kind of order our life around the seasons, and so each season brings in a new step. So in the spring, we start with preparing the fields for planting. And so we get all the old stumps out from a previous planting and work the soil, add any nutrients that the soil might need, and then we begin to plant. In the summer, it's more making sure the trees are growing, can be some watering possibly. It's keeping the weeds and grasses down so the competition isn't great on those new trees. It's watching for any kind of diseases that might be in there. It's also making sure that everything is growing. And then in the fall, it's time for harvest. So we're out tagging the trees, deciding which ones should be cut, how many we can cut to make sure that our farms are sustainable, because we can't overcut. So, and then of course, by the time Christmas comes, it's the sales season. So we order our lives kind of around the seasons.
I always thought it was interesting. We had a tree farmer in the family, and they were busy during the summer, and it kind of, it was one of those eye-awakening things where I was like, well, what do you have to do now in the summer? But of course, there's a lot of maintenance required during the off season.
Well,
even Santa's working in the summer.
Yeah. So when I was a little boy, before we had a Christmas tree farm, my dad would come to us at the breakfast table sometimes, and he would say, this would be, in May, and we're going off school, and he'd say, have you thought about Christmas today? Just because, when you're 4, you think about Christmas every day. And back then, sometimes they'd say yes or no. Well, now that we have a Christmas tree farm, if he were to come to me at the breakfast table and say, have you thought about Christmas today? It's how many times have we thought about Christmas today? There's no day that we don't think about it.
Wow. You talked a little bit about diseases and, kind of looking out for that. Are there any emerging dangers like that to the industry? Pests, diseases, climate, like things insects? Like that?
Yes, there are always new diseases and insects that we are aware of. There are strict, for certain parts of the country and on certain kinds of trees, there are quarantines where you cannot transport some trees to other places for the purposes of protecting, places that don't have diseases yet from those. And it is one of the things I think about all the time is what's the next disease that might come in that we have to treat for. And it's one of the reasons that, I in particular am experimenting and testing new varieties, because having diversity within the varieties of trees that we plant will make us more resilient when those things come. And it's the fear of the unknown on that. I mean, the Scotch pine market, where, the country used to grow tens of millions of Scotch pines, has been devastated by a number of diseases and greatly reduced the number of Scotch pine that are growing.
Hmm.
One of the things that we try to do on our farm is emulate what would that tree be like in a natural setting. So in a forest setting, and by by trying, we don't achieve that, but by trying to do that, we get beneficial insects in that might take out some of the diseases. And like Shawn says, we also rotate through different species. That's very important. So to plant a monoculture of a certain type of tree would not be helpful in controlling diseases. The other thing that we do, and it's still fairly new, is we do a lot of mulching. So trees like it cool generally. They don't like, direct sunlight. So they like an east slope or a north slope, or the soil temperature is huge in a healthy tree. And so by letting grasses come in, by mulching, we mulch all our new seedlings with composted mulch. It's helping keep that soil temperature down, and so it creates a healthier tree, more resistant to diseases.
Okay. We are obviously experiencing climate change in our world. How has that affected the industry?
I'm not sure. Well, for here, I can't speak to other parts of the country. For here, I don't know that we know if we have been impacted yet or not from climate change. But I don't know for all growers, but it's something that I think about, and it's the uncertainty of it that makes me nervous. So like This year, we were very wet and cool, which is ideal for growing fir trees. It was a great year for growing trees. But many of the predictions show us being warmer, and some show us being drier. Warmer might be a bigger issue for us. And it's the uncertainty of that coming is what species are we going to be able to grow, if any, of the traditional species in the future.
Especially when you're planning at 8 years.
Right, yeah. When it takes you 8 years at a minimum to adapt, that's assuming you can even get the transplant stock to put in to plant the little trees. Mm-hmm. It takes us a longer time to adapt than if we were growing annual crops. And so I'm not sure what Neil thinks, but the uncertainty definitely concerns me, because we are already on the margin of being able to grow fir trees. And so a little bit of change could change our growing potential quite a bit.
Oh, I see. You're kind of on the edge already.
Are you? What zone are you in? Is that a fair question?
Well, we're zone 4, but in terms of where balsam fir trees grew naturally, it was more north of here. And Fraser fir, which originate from the Carolinas, are used to the cool, somewhat more humid mountain slope environment, which, as of now, we can still grow Fraser fir. But if we were to warm up, particularly in the months of May and June, and the soil temperatures got too hot, it very well could reduce our ability to grow things like Fraser fir.
Okay. I was listening to an interview on the way to school this morning, and one of the, they were talking about the impacts of climate change on agriculture, and of course there are considerable, detriments, but there also can be benefits. So when you said that made me think a little bit about, there could be some benefits. However, like you said, the unpredictability and the nature of not being able to kind of forecast in the future is definitely a challenge, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the variability comes in, and uncertainty comes in multiple ways. One is just the long term, what are we going to be in the future? But, on our farm, my mom has been a weather monitor for the last 45 years. So she supplies rainfall and temperature data to the state as part of a citizens monitoring network. And the thing that we notice in our very own record is not that we are either wetter or drier, but that we are more variable being wet and dry. We've had some of our very wettest years followed by some of our very driest years back to back. That variability is part of the problem. So we could become wetter and cooler, maybe, which would be great for growing balsam fir. But if 1 year in there you're catastrophically dry, you wipe out all the other years. And so the long-term trajectory might be favorable for Christmas trees. I don't know. But if you have this high variability in temperature and wetness, that can be a real killer for growing trees.
Yeah, things are looking good maybe on average, but it's those extremes, like Shawn says, that can either wipe you out or maybe help you with your crop. And I think what we do as an industry is we kind of watch what's happening with trees migrating north. Certain species like walnuts are moving further north. Some of the firs and the boreal forests are moving further north. So some of those things that factually we know are happening, concerns us as an industry, and it's kind of a wait and see. What does it really mean for us?
Now, we're in the Midwest. We're not too far from you, actually. Although we definitely support some of the different professional football teams or universities as well. That's
Brian, we have
that's
to keep him on the line yet. We're not done yet.
Yeah. But in any case, when we think of like some of our Midwest winters that we've had, we had an exceptionally cold winter last year for a brief spit there, and we are already in a colder winter starting right now. How does the cold affect that?
Well, fir trees, grow much farther north than here, so cold by itself doesn't necessarily pose a problem for us. There are years where we have something called winter burn, which is like a sunburn. The needles will turn red, particularly on either younger trees or trees that have been stressed, and then those needles will fall off. It makes the tree unsightly, doesn't usually kill them.
Okay.
But the conditions that link to winter burn are more than just severe cold. It's snow cover. Was the soil saturated in the fall? And do you get one of the things that does it is you have a very cold day, the sun comes out, bounces off the snow, warms up the needles, and then the sun goes behind a cloud and it's minus 20 out, and then you get winter burn.
Oh, wow.
Or at least that's
Sure.
the theory of how some of it happens.
Hmm.
But cold has some benefits, because cold kills some of the pests that have life cycles that could otherwise get this far north.
Oh, I see.
So having cold interspersed in winter, I'm more than happy with.
Yeah, mosquitoes. Bye.
It's mosquitoes.
Right. And we always say if we get cold, we want a blanket of snow, because there's a drying effect if there's no snow cover of the soil and the roots. So it's important to have. If it's getting cold, you want some snow on there first, and then it can get cold.
Gotcha.
Let's talk about how many trees. Do you have a sense of, I'm sure for your own farms, but how many trees are harvested each season?
Neil, we should know that. Is it
I
about
guess in the
25
US.
million right now?
About 20-some million or 22 million. Yeah. What did you say, Shawn?
I think it's somewhere between 23 and 25 million real trees are harvested in the United States, which is down from what it was 30 years ago, but is slowly coming back up a little bit.
Why do you think it went down?
Traditions. Let's see. I think the artificial tree industry has done a lot of marketing, so I think that's part of it.
Okay. Okay. How about your own farms? How many trees do you do each season? Is that something you can share?
Well, we usually don't talk about how many. We just say we grow and sell as many as we can.
Yeah,
But on our farm, we are close to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, so we are limited on how many trees we can grow here, and so we buy trees from other farms across Minnesota and some Wisconsin.
Okay.
We actually bring trees in, and so we're able to go to the best farms, harvest the best trees, and bring them in here as a pre-cut tree.
Do customers come and get the trees directly from you, or do you distribute them to sellers?
No, we only sell retail, and so they can either come and choose a tree from our fields or choose one that's already been selected for them from another farm.
Oh, so do you have the choose option where you go out and cut it with the family and select the tree and cut it down?
Yes, we do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes, we do. Yep. And one thing that's a very emerging trend for us, at least, is people like to come out in October and pre-select their tree.
Oh, really?
Put their name on it, and then come back and cut it during the Christmas season.
Like tree squatting.
What does an average tree, and I'm sure it varies from location to location, but what's the average rate for a Christmas tree price?
Our trees generally are between $8 to $10 per foot.
Oh, okay.
And if they're a larger tree, anything over say 9 or 10 feet, then it goes up per foot. But generally, you can get a nice 8-foot balsam for in that 80 to 90 range, and a Fraser would be 90 to 100 in that same size.
What's the biggest tree, tallest that will be purchased?
We have some trees that go up to 16 feet, but
wow.
We generally try to stay under 12. We have some long-term customers that and so we always find a big tree for them. But for the most part, we try to stay under 12 feet. 90% of our trees are 8 foot, 7 to 8 foot.
Okay.
You mentioned the harvesting of around 20 to 25 million live trees. Let's talk about that elephant in the room, the fake tree versus the real tree. Here's your chance. What are your thoughts there? I know what your thoughts are, but could you talk about the sustainability of tree farming for a real versus synthetic tree? Is there one that's more environmentally friendly?
So, and I'll answer that, and I'll build a little bit on what Neil said too, also about choosing and cutting trees. So we have a similar kind of farm where people come out and they pick out the tree and cut the tree themselves and take it home. And I would say that having done that now for a long time, I'm pretty confident in saying that the tree that we sell is not really the most important thing. And having a perfect number one quality tree, certainly people have different opinions of what that is, and is not the critical thing. It's the fact that people come out together as a family and spend time, and we offer a lot of other things. There's food and there's straw tunnels for them to crawl around on, and that's the really key thing. And I think that's what separates a real tree from our artificial tree, is the experience you have in getting it, and that you're doing something. I mean, we have a large parking lot because people come and stay for a long time. And I've realized that they're coming and they're intending to spend 4 hours together as a family, no matter what, no matter whether it's cold, no matter whether they got the perfect tree or not. It's just something to do. Mm-hmm. And you don't have that same experience with an artificial tree. That being said, I would also say there are probably times where having an artificial tree might be okay. If you are unable to get outside, you can't deal with certain things, but you still want to celebrate Christmas and have something that is a focal point for putting lights and gathering around, I'm glad to see people do that no matter what.
Sure.
And share and to have that. And so, but from an environment, and then to the environmental standpoint, there's no question. The real tree is better for the environment for a number of reasons. Some are obvious that get touted all the time. Real trees produce oxygen. Real trees take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it in the roots. And so as long as we're continuing to grow Christmas trees, we're storing some carbon. But one of them that is often overlooked is the habitat value. Christmas trees, particularly when they're in that 6 to 9 year old range, are absolutely phenomenal nesting habitat for songbirds. Cedar waxwings, goldfinches, mourning doves, robins, cardinals love Christmas trees. We've actually done some surveys on them, and the densities that we see songbirds nesting in Christmas trees far exceed the neighboring fields. And if people weren't buying Christmas trees and cutting them down, we wouldn't be growing them. We'd be growing corn and beans, and those birds wouldn't have a place to nest. Mm-hmm. And so that habitat value. Plus, we grow cover crops in between the trees, and we grow white Dutch clover, which is a fantastic pollinator plant. So we're supporting a lot of wildlife benefits on those trees. And then they get to be 8, 9 feet tall, they get cut down, and we replant them and start the whole cycle over again.
And this is a crop that doesn't require external irrigation, correct?
We don't irrigate. Some tree growers, depending on where they are, do irrigate some. And many of the people who do irrigate use things like drip irrigation, so it's a very small input. In comparison to other crops, even when irrigation is done, trees are a minor consumption. But I would say the majority of Christmas tree farms do not irrigate their whole farms.
Okay.
I see.
Right, and let me just add that one of the benefits of growing trees. Trees are like a fresh air factory. Like Shawn says, they take in carbon, they give off oxygen. And, they help prevent soil erosion. And there's a beauty amongst Christmas trees. We're in an area where there's emerging development, and the homes around our farm, the aesthetics. Our neighbors say, don't go anywhere. Don't quit raising trees. We'd love living next to your farm.
We actually, my in-laws live near a Christmas tree farm, and the main thoroughfare is right past their house. And so the day after Thanksgiving, there are just, trucks of trees and trailers and trees that are haphazardly placed on small vehicles. It's kind of comical to watch it go by. But is that your busiest day as well, the day after Thanksgiving?
Yes, it is. That weekend is those 3 days are peak days.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that when the tree gets to the house and it gets picked up. I have a little history. As a kid, we always got a live tree. And then my mom would decorate it, just all kinds of those elaborate decorations. It was really her thing. And she'd use fishing line to tie a branch down to cover a hole up and put baby's breath in and ribbons and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And then just a wild scene underneath with houses and nativity and all that kind of stuff. But then there was the gimmicks that were going around. Maybe they're not gimmicks. That's what I want to know, to keep the tree alive. So I can tell you that my mom was in the newspaper because she kept the tree alive for Valentine's Day and decorated with hearts and made it to St. Patrick's Day with green and shamrocks on. And there were some tricks that were out there. One was to cut a V in the trunk. So they put a little V in the middle of the trunk. That was one. Another one was, I think, and I don't know if we did this one, put aspirin in the water. My wife said there was something about putting sugar in the water. Do you know anything about these, let's call them home remedies to keep your tree alive?
So almost all of those have been shown to not be advantageous to the tree.
Oh, so they're problematic. Oh, not advantageous. Okay.
Not advantageous. So some are not problematic, but also not an advantage. And some of them, there's even some people. There's some myth going around. You should add a teaspoon of bleach to your tree. That will be a real problem.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So in general, what we tell the customers is, if you want to, number one, buy a fresh tree that is known to have good needle retention. And so in the industry, by and large, the trees that don't have good needle retention for at least reputable growers are not sold anymore. Mm-hmm. And we focus on needle retention and fragrance are the two number one things that we select on when we're either selecting genetics for trees. So we want to know that when a tree goes up, even if you are not as careful as you should be, it will still hold its needles. You get the tree home. If it was not fresh cut, you cut off a thin wafer off the bottom, get it in water. Maybe use warm water, but not hot water the first time, and then keep it watered, and keep it don't put it, if you can avoid it, don't put it in the hottest, driest part of your house, not next to the fireplace. Is good.
Oh,
and
sure.
The tree should last, well into January if you do that. But there are a few very defined floral preservatives that can provide benefit, but they are not the things that are generally provided, and they are not the home remedies.
It's not like the flower pack that you get when you get a bouquet?
So Floral Right, which is the floral pack, has actually had mixed results, and it's something that we've tested. And so I don't advise people to do it, but if they're doing it, I don't tell them not to.
Now, the other thing I've heard is that if it does dry out, then that could be problematic because then the tree can seal on the bottom and prevent that from, even if you add more water. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think that happens for a lot of people.
Oh.
Yep. So, and it's one of the things that I test. I personally think what happens with a lot of Christmas trees is they cut them, they have a good intention, they bring them home, they water the tree, they stand it up, and then they forget to water it for a week, and they go in and, the water's down. By then, the tree's already sealed off the bottom, and they water it again, and it doesn't take any more water. Oh. And so when I test trees for needle retention, that's the procedure I repeat because I think it's what happens. And I can tell you, there's a lot of trees that we sell now that will survive that sort of care regime just fine.
And I've noticed, too, that it takes a lot of water on the first few days, more than it does as it kind of settles in. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I know that my cats, for instance, also add to that water level dropping, but I have noticed it go down quite fast in the first 24 hours, especially, and 48 for sure.
And that's a good sign.
Yeah, that's correct. So one of the questions we get is, my tree doesn't drink any water. Mm-hmm. And so we say, don't be alarmed if your tree doesn't drink. Each tree is different depending on where it was grown, how much moisture it took in, things like that. And like Shawn says, the varieties that we sell will hold up fine, even if they don't drink a lot of water. That's not normal, but it's not it's not unusual either. We've had trees that don't drink. One of the things and we've had people call and say, "Oh, I left my tree go dry." One of the things that we recommend is to take a mist bottle with the lights off and just spray the needles, because the tree will absorb moisture through its needles.
Oh, sure.
And so that's one
through
way
the stomates.
Yeah, to continue to make sure the tree is fresh. One other thing is that in order to, if the bottom seals off and the tree goes dry, you can drill a series of holes, if you can get in there with a hand drill, and around the perimeter of the trunk below the water level, and that will maybe open up some new avenues for the tree to absorb water.
So without taking it off the stand and re-cutting a slice, you could do that a little bit. Little tree surgery.
Yep.
Do you guys get like emergency calls then? On it's like it's Christmas Eve and our tree, like the Butterball hotline, basically.
We get a few of those a year.
Yeah.
Let me add too on the cutting the V in the bottom. Things like that. The cutting the V isn't going to really do much. The tree only takes water through the outer layer of bark. So the inner wood of the tree isn't absorbing water anyway.
I cut that V for nothing.
There'll be one other thing that people read about, and I wonder if it's true, is you read online, it says, do not have ripening bananas next to your Christmas tree. Because it'll make the tree
ethylene.
As it turns out, that's true.
Oh.
Ripening fruit gives off a gas called ethylene. It's why you will sometimes put fruit in a bag to let it ripen, because it's giving off the gas, ethylene, and it'll ripen faster. And the ethylene gas is, in fact, what causes a tree to, shall we say, mature and would contribute to it dropping its needles. So that's one of the home myths that is actually found. Now, I think it would take a lot of ripening bananas, but the mechanism is correct.
Sure.
So we don't see a lot of banana ornaments out there.
Yeah, I would not. Don't hang fresh bananas on the Christmas tree.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about the tree after the holidays. Before we let you go, what I can tell you what happens here. We have Lake Winnebago, so it's a big ice fishing situation. So the trees, for when I was a kid, the Christmas trees were always the markers for the mile markers and the quarter mile markers for going out for ice fishing. And so in February, a lot of those trees wound up out on the ice. Anything else that that what happens to the end life of the tree?
Well, we recommend that if you have the ability, put the tree out and let the birds and feed in it or nest in it, just for habitat.
Prop it up.
Yeah, prop it up. We also recommend to our customers that they bring their tree back to us, and we, in the spring, will chip it up and use it for mulch around our trees. And so that's kind of a nice way to complete the cycle, and we have customers that do that. They can also put it out for their trash hauler. Trash haulers generally will chip them. Sometimes they get incinerated for electrical power or whatever. But our customers seem to like the fact that they can bring the tree back to the farm where they bought it. They know another tree is going to be planted, that the wood from that tree will be used to generate growth on new trees. So it completes the cycle.
Sure.
Well, I have one last question for you before we let you go. You've been fantastic, by the way. This is exactly you've answered all my tree questions as I've had them. But as a science teacher, as a chemistry teacher, I would have wanted to do this. And maybe if we have any listeners out who want to try this out, I'd love to hear what you find out. But what's the best method of getting sap off of your hands or your clothes?
No kidding.
Well,
rubbing alcohol and soap will do a lot.
Okay.
A good strong dish soap will clean it off, and my wife just told me that shampoo takes it off.
Oh, interesting. Again, I think this is a chemistry lab. I would have done this in my class.
Oh yeah, just like a mystery box trees.
Yeah, do you supply raw sap at all for science teachers?
Yeah,
the kids can come and work there.
Yeah. You have to be sappy to work here.
Okay.
If I can ask you guys a question.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Choose to put this in or not, and this is for all of the teachers or students who might do this. it's a personal objective of mine as part of what I do in my work. But I just want to ask everybody's doing this to think about for a second. You've got this Christmas tree that grew for 12 years total, and at the end, by the time you put it in your house, it weighs 80 pounds. Where did all of the wood, all of the mass, all of the dry wood in that tree come from?
I know where you're going with this one. That's a great question.
I'll just leave that, but I want to... It's one of the things that people, not just tree buyers, everybody doesn't appreciate enough. And it's important right now with all the debates that we're having on climate change and things like that. So
that's excellent. You left us with, if teachers
homework.
Are playing this in class, they have a discussion question right after the episode. This is perfect way.
Yeah, and if you think about the scope and sequence for biology, you might have to bring that plant unit up. I'm giving you a hint there. So, yeah. But no, that's a fantastic
equation that's important, and it does not include the word soil in the equation.
I love it. And this has been actually this is fun. We've never had any of our guests give our listeners homework, so that's fantastic too.
Yes. Excellent. Well, we hope you guys both have a wonderful holiday season. That all your trees go out to happy houses and they last well past the time they're expected to. Anything else you guys would like to add before we close up with you?
No, just
thank you for the opportunity, Brian.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's beginning to snow here at our home, and so it looks like it's Christmas time right now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And good luck with the upcoming season here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Lab Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about some of the things discussed in this episode or previous episodes, you can find show notes at our website, laboutloud.com. If you have a guest idea or a future topic that you'd like to see on Lab Out Loud, go to our contact page and send us a message. Also, you can subscribe to Lab Out Loud on your favorite podcasting app, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you like to find podcasts. While you're there, leave us a review and rating. Your input helps others find our show. Thanks again for listening.